Fraser, top of the morning to you. Let's lead on Nigel Lawson. A big figure, so much and so. Rishi Sunak put a portrait of him above his desk when he first became elected as Prime Minister. What do you think he'll be remembered for?
Well, Nigel Lawson is probably the person with... If you think about Thatcherism and the kind of policies we associate with that, Nigel Lawson was really the man behind a lot of them. You know, think of the big bang of financial deregulation, a lot of the privatisations that went through in that period, and the cutting of the top rate of tax. So he'll be remembered by that for his fans, by his critics. He'll probably be remembered for the bust that followed the Lawson boom, the big recession of the 1990s when Britain crashed out of the exchange rate mechanism. If people don't know or don't remember, the exchange rate mechanism was the precursor to the euro.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Lawson favoured that, but later came out as a very staunch Brexiteer, you know, big champion of the UK leaving the EU. In later life, he was an interesting kind of contrarian figure.
Yeah.
He very much was a climate sceptic, not a climate change denier, as many people would say, but he often railed against excessive green policies and asked people to look at maybe some of the upsides of global warming, things like that. So an important kind of intellectual contrarian figure, always a fly in the ointment. And I guess maybe there aren't enough politicians like that, even if you disagree with his particular views.
There have been so many tributes pouring in, haven't they? I mean, he was really respected within the Conservative Party.
Yeah, and I think for the Conservative Party today, which is pretty, I think it's fair to say, ideologically adrift, doesn't really know what it stands for, I'm not surprised that they would want to look back to a time when they felt, at least, that there was maybe something more to them, maybe a bit more substance, maybe a bit more intellectual heft. I mean, it does have to be said that often, you know, people romanticise the past. Lawson and Thatcher and these figures were probably a bit more pragmatic than we now see today. They weren't actually as the ideological crusaders we imagine them to be now. But, you know, again, contrast that with today, where people believe in nothing.
You might say there's an irony in the fact that this guy's become a poster boy for chancellors of the modern era, yet we have a Tory government now that don't have the policies of Lawson. I mean, we have the highest tax regime since World War II. Maybe a little bit of Lawson nowadays might go down well with the Tory electorate.
Well, isn't that what Kwasi Kwarteng was trying to do? He was trying to channel Lawson, and clearly the conditions weren't right for it, and it blew up in his face. I mean, one thing, talking about sort of pragmatism, you know, the Thatcher government did wait a long time before they started putting in their kind of reforms. If you think about the big tax cut from 60p to 40p, that only came in 1988, you know, so a long time into something that we can totally associate with Thatcherism and the Tories of that era, actually coming, you know, nearly 10 years into their administration. So, yeah, whether they were as bold as we like to think, I'm not sure. I think history is tricking us a little bit there.
So,
let's move along to Keir Starmer, shall we? Because it's 3 years of Keir Starmer as Labour leader. Front page of the Times today, almost half of voters say he still lacks vision. Must be said, though, that's up from polling in September 2021, but still suggesting he's not very inspiring.
It's not very inspiring, doesn't have any original ideas and doesn't really have a sense of direction. I think, who could blame those voters? Every time, you know, Keir Starmer makes an announcement, it's usually either he's saying that he's going to continue sitting on the fence or he's reversing a previous position or flip-flopping on something. He has flipped-flopped on everything from Brexit to trans rights to pretty much his entire programme that he sold himself as Labour leader. You know, when he spoke to Labour members, he pretty much said he was going to back the entire Corbyn programme. It was about change of leadership, not about change of policy. Now, that's all been scrapped. He spent the past 3 years trying to distance himself from Corbyn. In fact, that's the only thing we know that he isn't. We know that he is not Jeremy Corbyn, but what actually does he stand for is unclear. It's
interesting. There's a YouGov poll out today, and the highest score that Starmer gets as a leader at 34%, he's average. And 28% say he's terrible, 22% say he's great. But it is his birthday. Let's be a little bit charitable. Is this lack of a hard line on the things you mentioned, like Brexit, trans issues, is that actually turning into something of a strength? And the reason I say that is because he's appearing to be, well, he's not alienating votes like Corbyn did. And this kind of Mr. Magnolia, is that actually clever He's not a threat and he's not putting people off.
It might work in a general election. It might work to be able to use this terrible new Labour phrase, triangulate. You know, to speak to different groups at different times, to speak with two sides of your mouth. But when you are then in government, you have to make decisions. And if you don't have any views, if you don't have any ideology, then you can quite easily be buffeted by events and by the forces of change. So I think a politician without ideology is actually a dangerous thing, whether you disagree with that view or not. You need someone who has a coherent set of principles. And Keir Starmer, you know, famously is the kind of politician who says, well, if you don't like these principles,
there will be police forces
here are some
outside
others.
of London.
I mean, the polling for Keir Starmer personally isn't always great, but Labour has been ahead in the polls for a long time now, and I think it has come a long way as a party in 3 very short years, as you say, almost unrecognisable, really, to Corbyn's party.
I think, well, another one of Keir Starmer's adages, which I think he is, you know, proving to be true, is that oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them.
Yeah.
And, you know, we really shouldn't underestimate the complete implosion of the support in the Tories, you know, following on from the scandals that brought down Boris, then to the kind of mini Liz Truss disaster, and now Rishi Sunak just, you know, clawing his way back slowly. You know, there was a piece in the Times at the weekend suggesting that Sunak would be happy to be on 30% around this kind of time, which is, you know, pretty low expectations.
Yeah, I think that it's all to 5. Well, I think you're right, Fraser. I think it feels like Starmer's to lose.
Yeah.
And if you keep sitting on the fence, maybe you might just do that.
And even just in electoral terms, you know, they have a lot of seats they need to win back. That's not easy, even if they, you know, do pick up a good swing.
How would he win an election, Fraser? What does he need to do in the next year or so?
I think he needs to just be consistent about certain things. I think he needs to set out a clear vision.
Policies would help?
Policies would help. I mean, because everything is always a little bit vague. You know, I think he sometimes tries to sound radical on certain issues. If you think about, the only thing he sounds radical about is green energy, which I don't think most people are that bothered about, and is probably not a good idea in the long run. Yeah. He's aping the Tories on pretty much everything else. You know, he's just released his own antisocial behaviour policy. A week after Rishi Sunak released his antisocial behaviour policy.
A week after the Tories asked for more please.
And you know, he's agreeing to a lot of the Tory crackdown on immigration and things like that. I think he needs to find something distinctive. I think he's going to struggle because he's not someone who original ideas come to quite easily.
But then how much of a problem is the old political left? I mean, there's all talk about Corbyn. Will he stand as an independent in Islington? Will he be allowed back through the cat flap to be a Labour Party? Is the old Labour left dead? Can Starmer go through the middle, or could they come back to bite him on the bum?
I think they're pretty much powerless as a force in British politics. I mean, they might, you know, people might be sympathetic to their views on social media or whatever, but in terms of Labour is Starmer's party now. There's absolutely no question. I mean, he has completely rooted them out of the key kind of structures of the party. So it's, you know, his way or the highway. He's the one deciding who's going to be your local MP, not those people, not people in the left, not even people in sort of local membership associations. I just don't think. I think he has quite ruthlessly cut them out. And also, you know, let's not forget these people don't even have a particular media platform. There's not anywhere else where they can make their arguments. So they are in the wilderness.